Okay, this is the last video. We're going to talk about the short-run aggregate supply before we move on to talking about the total macroeconomy in general. So in this video, we're just going to talk about the shifts of short-run aggregate supply. So the first one, the first category is going to be the same as long-run aggregate supply. So these shifts, and for this one, I'll just look at it increase because it generally will be an increase. It's possible to decrease, but not very normal. Okay, would just be things like increasing capital, increasing human capital, increasing labor, increase in natural resources, or at least the availability of them, and increase in tech. Okay, so what does this look like? Well, we can draw this over in a graph on the side. Okay, so we're here, we have some year, this is our long-run aggregate supply for this year, and we have also a short-run aggregate supply for this year. And then all these things increase. We get more tech, more labor, more capital. So our long-run aggregate supply increases, and our short-run aggregate supply also increases. Sorry, I made a mistake in the way I wrote this one. Let me fix it. Okay, that's the first year, and this is the second year. Okay, so in this case, our potential GDP was here, and now it's here. Right? It has increased. So, and that will cause, so when your potential GDP goes up, your short-run aggregate supply also goes up because you're at the same price level, you're just capable of producing more. Okay, so we're not going to focus on that one very much because this section we're really focusing on the short run, not these long run things. The second one, and the one we're going to focus on the most, is the change in input costs. Okay, so big change in input cost. If it's a big one, the big one we call, generally people like to call this a supply shock. Okay, so the supply shock could be positive or negative, but there could be smaller, kind of more normal adjustments as well, like just changing the wages from year to year. We wouldn't really call those supply shocks. So anyways, let's look at a few of these. So let's look at the first one. Okay, so we could have this situation. So I'll draw the graph and then we'll write the description next to it. Okay, so we got our typical graph. Okay, and so we have our long-run aggregate supply, and then we have our short-run aggregate supply. Okay, for this year. Now I'm going to assume here I'm going to hold the growth factors constant. So I'm holding y potential GDP constant, just because it will get too complicated if we have too many things changing all at the same time. Okay, so let's suppose we have an increase in our input costs. We got an increase in input costs. So a typical one, if it's a major supply shock, this might be energy, for example, like oil costs, the price of oil. It also could be labor. Now, this could be a normal situation where it's just like wages are rising kind of, year to year, like the adjustments we saw earlier, or this could be some kind of shock. But most likely, if this happens, we're talking energy prices or something that's fundamental to the economy. So this is going to cause then a decrease in the short-run aggregate supply. So it's decreasing because the firms are going to need to their costs have gone up and they're less willing to produce at each price level. So at a certain price level, they're going to make less money than they were before because their nominal costs have risen. And then finally, we can just you can probably guess where we're going next, which do the opposite situation. Okay, so put your long-run aggregate supply and your short-run aggregate supply. Okay, again, holding growth constant. And then we get a decrease in our input costs. So again, this is often labor or wages. And so decrease our input costs is going to cause short-run aggregate supply. So there could be three kind of big things. One would be energy, like oil. It could be wages, because of maybe a big influx of workers. It also could be some other kind of important input but it has to be something that's across the broader economy, not just isolated to one single or just a few industries. So anyways, we're going to see this as an increase in short-run aggregate supply. Remember, supply curves increase increase left to right, and so we'll see this increase in short-run aggregate supply. Okay, so these are the things that cause the shifts. So just as a quickly to remember, that the first thing is productivity. Productivity is the same as long run air supply, and the part that's different is input costs change the short run air supply, but they do not affect the long run air supply. So we can summarize it as productivity and input costs.